Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome back. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And how has your evening been so far? Settle in, take a breath. Let the quiet wrap around you, because tonight we travel to Brambleford Hollow, a village woken by a sound long forgotten. A dawn bell, a dead historian, and a letter no one will claim. Dawn settled slowly over Brambleford Hollow. Soft light touched the rooftops. The lanes stayed empty. Nothing stirred yet. The village breathed in silence. Miss Marple sat at her window. Her teacup warmed her hands. She enjoyed these quiet moments. They felt gentle. They felt honest. They felt safe. Bramblegate Cottage held its own peace. The small clock ticked softly. The room glowed faintly. The world outside felt still. Miss Marple lifted her cup. She sipped carefully. Warm, steadying, comforting. She glanced toward the garden. No robin hopped there. No sparrow fluttered. Not even a single chirp. Unusual for dawn. She looked to the hedgerow. Perfectly still. Not a leaf shifted. No breeze teased its edges. The quiet deepened. Too deep. Almost heavy. Miss Marple noticed it instantly. Her instincts always did. Stillness meant something. Not always danger, but something. She tapped her fingers lightly. A small habit. A thinking habit. Something nudged her thoughts. A faint, subtle warning. She peered out again. The lane looked calm. The cottages slept quietly. Curtains stayed drawn. Chimneys cold. Even the cat from next door, never late for its morning wander, was nowhere to be seen. Miss Marple set her cup down. Her eyes narrowed slightly. This morning felt different. Not wrong. Just waiting. Waiting for what? She didn't know yet. But she trusted the feeling. She always trusted it. She leaned forward slowly. Her breath met the glass. She studied the old gatehouse. Its roof caught the first light. Its shadow stretched across the gravel. The gatehouse had history. Old history. Strange history. It watched the village quietly, guarded it, in a way. Miss Marple had walked past it for years. It rarely changed. It rarely mattered. But today, it held her attention. A little too much. Something tickled the back of her mind. A shift in air. A slight pressure, like a held breath. She stepped closer to the window. Her slippers whispered across the floor. She steadied herself on the sill. The quiet pressed harder. Dawn should bring life. But no life came. Not yet. Miss Marple frowned gently. Her instinct whispered again. Not safe. Not usual. Not normal. She watched the gatehouse door. Still. Shut. Silent. Then she felt it. A tremor in the air. Soft. Thin. Like the moment before lightning. Her heart tightened slightly. Not with fear. With certainty. Something was coming. She could sense it. The village could sense it. Even the birds seemed to sense it. Miss Marple held her breath. She waited. Listened. Listened harder. The stillness stretched. Too long. Too tight. Then it cracked. A faint sound rose. Low. Deep. Metallic. Miss Marple froze. Her eyes widened. The ancient gatehouse bell rang. Once. Twice. A third time. Sharp. Cold. Impossible. Miss Marple whispered softly. Oh dear. This cannot be good. She reached for her shawl. The bell echoed again in her mind. The calm morning shattered. The village was no longer waiting. Something had already happened. Something terrible. And Miss Marple stepped toward her door. Because quiet trouble had just arrived. The village was calm. Seconds before it wasn't. The bell rang again. Its sound cut through the quiet. Hard. Sharp. Unmistakable. Miss Marple froze instantly. Her breath paused. Her fingers tightened around her shawl. That bell was never used. Never touched. Never heard. 3 strikes. Measured. Heavy. Metal against metal. The old gatehouse bell had slept for 40 years. Its ropes were sealed. Its mechanism locked away. Its purpose long forgotten. Except by the oldest villagers. and by Miss Marple. She stepped out onto her porch. Cold air swept across her face. The morning light wavered, as if the village itself hesitated, as if the bell had awakened something else. Miss Marple stood still, listened again, waited for a fourth strike. None came. Only silence returned. A silence too quiet, too complete, too wrong. She walked forward slowly. Her slippers brushed the earth. Her shawl held close to her shoulders. She reached the end of her path, paused, looked at the gatehouse. Its dark outline sat against the rising Sunday. Its roof shimmered with dew. Its small window glowed faintly. Nothing moved inside. Nothing stirred outside. Yet she felt it. A pull, a warning, a message carried in the cold air. Miss Marple tightened her grip on her shawl. Her eyes narrowed gently. There was no accident here, no mischief. The sound had purpose, precise purpose. She stepped further into the lane. Her feet found the familiar stones. Her breath formed small clouds. Still no movement. Still no voices. Still no birds. Dawn had been quiet before. But this was different. This was fearful quiet. Waiting quiet. Miss Marple touched the old stone wall, steadying herself, listening again. The village finally responded. A door opened somewhere behind her. Then another. Footsteps rushed out. Murmurs rose in confusion. The bell had done its job, whatever that job was. Miss Marple turned slightly. Villagers appeared along the lane. Nightcoats clutched, faces pale, eyes wide with confusion. No one spoke at first. Then a single voice broke through. "Did you hear it?" Miss Marple nodded slowly. "I did." Her voice was calm, firm, certain. It rang again in memory. That deep, metallic echo. It had weight. It had intention. She looked back to the gatehouse. The door stood shut. The lock, untouched. The place completely still. How could it ring? Someone whispered. "It can't ring," another muttered. "It's sealed," a woman insisted. Miss Marple said nothing yet. She studied the shadows instead, watched the light, watched the ground, watched the silence. 40 years. No sound, no movement, no reason. But today, 3 perfectly timed strikes. At dawn. When no one expected them, Miss Marple felt a chill. Not from the air. From the truth hiding beneath it. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone wanted attention. Someone wanted witnesses. She took one more step forward. Slow, measured, careful. Whatever waited at the gatehouse, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a signal. And Miss Marple whispered softly, barely above a breath. "This is the beginning. Why would the sealed gatehouse bell ring at dawn after 40 silent years?" Doors opened all along the lane, one after another. Fast, sharp, startling in the quiet dawn. Villagers stepped out in night clothes, coats half-buttoned, slippers dragging on stone, faces pale with confusion. The bell still echoed faintly in their minds. Its metallic weight lingered. Its warning clung to the cold air. Miss Marple stood near her gate, watching, listening, measuring every sound. Mrs. Hemsley hurried from her porch, her shawl trailing behind her. "Did the bell ring?" she asked breathlessly, her eyes wide, terrified. Mr. Darlow followed, rubbing his arms. "It hasn't rung since the fire," he muttered. "And that was 40 years ago. A younger man joined them, James Porter, the baker's son. He looked shaken, confused. What if someone's hurt?" Voices overlapped, questions tangled together. Whispers sharpened, fear thickened. Miss Marple stayed calm. She let the village speak. She let the panic surface. It always revealed something useful. Mrs. Linton appeared next, clutching her dressing gown, her steps uneven, her face drained of color. "Who rang it?" she whispered. "Who would dare?" No one answered her. No one knew, and that alone frightened them more. Miss Marple's eyes moved slowly across the lane, watching every expression, every hesitation, every nervous glance. People were frightened, but people were also hiding things. Both mattered. A lantern flickered to life beside the Cooper cottage. Old Mr. Cooper stumbled out with it. His voice trembled as he said, "Get to the gatehouse. Quickly, before anything else happens." And with that, the crowd began to move. Slow at first, then faster, drawn toward the old structure at the end of the lane. Miss Marple followed at a measured pace. Not rushing, not lagging, watching everything. The villagers hurried ahead. Their feet slapped the stones. Their breathing grew loud. Someone gasped for air. Someone whispered a prayer. The closer they got, the colder the air felt. The gatehouse loomed larger, darker, silent now, but heavy with meaning. A few children peeked from doorways, eyes wide. Mothers pulled them back quickly. "Inside," one said sharply. "Now." Miss Marple noticed that. Fear made people protective. Fear made people honest. The crowd reached the gatehouse path. They slowed, hesitated, looked at each other nervously. No one wanted to be first. Miss Marple's steps were quiet behind them, her gaze steady, her heartbeat calm. Mr. Darlow gulped. We should check inside." Mrs. Hemsley clutched his arm. "Don't say that." But she looked anyway. A few villagers leaned forward, trying to see through the half-light, trying to make sense of the bell ringing, trying to understand what waited ahead. Then from somewhere in the crowd a sharp cry tore the air. High, frightened, immediate. A scream. The villagers spun toward the sound. Miss Marple stopped moving. Her eyes narrowed. Someone had seen something. Something terrible. The dawn panic sharpened instantly. Questions died. Silence crashed down. Miss Marple took one step forward, her voice low, controlled. "Show me." Because the scream came from someone standing closest to the gatehouse door. The villagers parted slowly, nervous, shaking, not wanting to look, yet unable to turn away. Miss Marple stepped through the crowd. Calm, steady. Her eyes softened, but her mind sharpened instantly. There, on the gravel before the gatehouse, lay a shape. Long, still, covered with a coat far too small to hide the truth. A pair of shoes stuck out. Brown leather, polished yesterday, now dusted with grit. Mrs. Linton knelt beside the body. Her hands trembled violently. Her sobs tore through the cold air. "He wouldn't go up there," she cried. "He never went near this horrible place." Constable Hart stood nearby, his face pale, his hands unsure of where to rest. He swallowed hard. "Stand back, please." "Stand!" His voice broke. He tried again. "Stand back, everyone." But no one moved. Miss Marple approached the body with quiet steps. She knelt just enough to study the shoes, the angle of the feet, the line of the coat, the way the gravel pressed upward. Something was off, very off. A whisper floated from the back of the crowd. "It's Mr. Edmund Blythe." Another voice finished it. "He's dead." Gasps rippled through the villagers. Mrs. Linton wailed louder. Mr. Cooper removed his cap. James Porter backed away slowly. Miss Marple bowed her head for a moment. Respectfully, calmly. Then she lifted the edge of the coat, just enough to see. Edmund's face was pale, shock frozen in his features, eyes partly open, a thin line of dust along his cheek. No blood, no visible wounds. Miss Marple lowered the coat gently. She breathed out, slow and light. Constable Hart whispered, "He fell from the balcony. Must have slipped." Miss Marple's head turned slightly. Her eyes narrowed. "Does it look like he slipped?" she asked softly. Hart hesitated. He wasn't sure. He wasn't sure of anything. "Mrs." Hemsley whispered. "He hated heights." Others nodded. "He never climbed those stairs." "He said it made him dizzy." "He always walked around the gatehouse." Miss Marple listened to each voice. Every detail mattered. She stepped closer to the body again, not touching it now, just observing, studying the way Edmund lay. His legs angled unnaturally, too straight, too neat, too carefully placed. The gravel around him showed almost no disturbance, no scuff marks, No drag lines, no sign of a fall, only the shoes pressing lightly into the stones. Miss Marple's brows tightened. She looked toward the gatehouse balcony, then at the door, then back at Edmund. No broken branches, no scattered debris, no displaced gravel. This body had not landed from above. It had been positioned, quietly, carefully, deliberately. The villagers murmured anxiously. Constable Hart wiped his forehead. Mrs. Linton sobbed louder. Fear moved through the crowd like cold water. Miss Marple straightened slowly. She stepped back from the body. Her voice was soft but firm. "This is wrong," she said. "Terribly wrong." The villagers stilled. All eyes turned to her. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Miss Marple looked at the body once more, at the shoes, at the gravel, at the strange, unnatural calm surrounding it. Then she whispered, "Edmund Blythe never fell here. If he didn't fall, then someone placed him, and someone wanted him found." The crowd gathered tighter around the gravel, faces tense, voices low, fear thickening with every passing second. Miss Marple stepped closer to the gatehouse stairs. Her eyes narrowed, her intuition sharpened. Something here did not add up. Mr. Cooper spoke first. His voice trembled. Edmund was terrified of heights. Always was. Mrs. Hemsley nodded quickly. He never climbed anything, not even a stool. Said it made his stomach twist. James Porter added softly. He avoided the gatehouse completely, took the long path around it. Miss Marple listened carefully. Every word mattered, especially now. Constable Hart tried to steady himself. He looked toward the balcony above, then down at the body. No one could fake a fall this high," he muttered. But even he didn't sound convinced. Miss Marple stepped onto the bottom stair, just lightly, just enough to look. A thin layer of dust coated the wooden steps, undisturbed, perfectly smooth. No footprints, no drag marks, no crushed particles. Not a single sign that anyone, Edmund or otherwise, had climbed those stairs. Mrs. Linton gasped when she saw it. "Oh, heavens! Then how?" Her voice faded into trembling silence. Miss Marple moved up 2 more steps, still careful not to disturb the dust. Her eyes scanned. Each surface, every corner, every rail. The dust told the story, a clear story, an honest story, one that did not match the body on the ground. She descended slowly. She brushed nothing, left no trace. The villagers watched her anxiously. What she found or didn't find held their breath in her hands. When she reached the bottom again, she said quietly, "No one has climbed these stairs today." Constable Hart blinked. His throat tightened. "But he must have." "How else?" Miss Marple gently interrupted. "Look at the dust, Mr. Hart. Years of it. Untouched, undisturbed. No marks of a fall. No sign of struggle. No sign anyone went up." A heavy silence followed. It wrapped the villagers, pressed upon them, forced them to think. Mrs. Hemsley whispered, "So, he didn't fall." Miss Marple shook her head slowly. "No." Mr. Porter swallowed hard. "Then, someone carried him?" Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the balcony again, to the stillness around the rail, to the absence of any battle. "It is unlikely," she murmured. "The balcony shows no disturbance, no scrapes, no dust brushed away, no signs of anyone leaning over to lift a body." The villagers stared, wide-eyed, uncertain, terrified of the truth creeping closer. Miss Marple looked at the gravel again, at the shoes, at the precise position of the legs, at the faint imprint around the body. "Someone placed him," she said softly, calmly, with absolute certainty. Gasps broke across the crowd. Fear tightened like a cold rope. Constable Hart shook his head. "Who would do that? And why ring the bell?" Miss Marple turned toward him, her expression thoughtful, her eyes sharper now. "The bell," she said quietly, "was never meant as a warning. It was a summons." A long silence followed. The villagers exchanged frightened glances. Miss Marple stepped back. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone wanted us to find the body. Someone wanted witnesses. But if Edmund didn't climb and didn't fall, then the killer is someone who knew he never would. Inspector Rowan Hale arrived just after sunrise. His coat still carried the cold of the morning. His boots struck the gravel with controlled steps. Calm, measured, cautious. The villagers parted for him. They always did. Authority walked differently. It carried a weight. And today that weight pressed heavily on everyone. Hale paused beside the body. He did not kneel at first. He simply looked, studied, absorbed. His eyes moved from the shoes, to the coat, to the untouched dust on the balcony. Then he exhaled once, slowly. "Right," he said quietly. "Who found him?" "Mrs." Linton lifted a shaking hand. Her tears streaked down her face. I saw his shoes first," she whispered. "I knew it was him. I knew." Hale gave a respectful nod. No pity, no dismissal. Just acknowledgement. It steadied her a little. Next he turned to Constable Hart. "What do we know so far?" Hart swallowed hard. "Villagers heard the bell, sir. 3 strikes. Everyone came running. Found Mr. Blythe like this." Hale frowned slightly. "The bell hasn't rung in decades." "I know, sir. Who touched it?" "No one, sir." Hale's frown deepened. He looked at the gatehouse door, then at the stairs, then at the balcony, then back at Edmund's still form. Too many things did not match. Too many details smelled wrong. He crouched finally, lifted the edge of the coat, looked at Edmund's face, noted the absence of blood, the lack of injuries, the unnatural calm. He lowered the coat again, stood, turned slowly toward the villagers. His gaze swept over every face, searching for guilt, fear, unease. Most looked terrified, some confused, a few suspiciously quiet, and then he saw her, Miss Marple, standing near the gate-post, hands folded neatly, eyes soft, expression composed. But her mind, Hale could practically feel it was already ahead of him. He watched her for a long second. She didn't speak, didn't move, didn't signal anything at all, but she knew something. He felt it instantly. He'd worked enough cases to recognize the look, the quiet certainty, the hidden calculation, the awareness sharper than fear. He walked toward her, slow, controlled, respectful. "Miss Marple," he said gently. His tone shifted, more polite, more attentive. "You've seen something, haven't you?" She hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Her voice, when it came, was calm. "I've seen enough to know this wasn't a fall." Hale lowered his head slightly. "Go on." But Miss Marple only smiled faintly. She looked past him, toward the gatehouse, toward the balcony, toward the dust no one had disturbed. Her silence spoke volumes. Hale followed her gaze, then stepped forward. He brushed his fingers lightly along the Placidame bottom stair. Dust rose in a thin, unbroken veil. His jaw tightened. "You're right," he murmured. "No one climbed these stairs." The villagers stirred nervously. Someone gasped. Hale stood straight again, turned to Miss Marple. "Then how?" She lifted one hand, stopping the question, stopping the conversation. Her eyes shifted suddenly, locking on someone in the crowd. Sharp, certain. Hale saw it. He stepped closer to her. "Miss Marple," he whispered, "what did you notice?" She didn't answer him. Not yet. She kept her eyes fixed on that one figure. Still, focused, silent. Because Miss Marple had just spotted something, or someone, that changed everything. Miss Marple stepped away from the crowd, quietly, calmly. Without drawing attention, Inspector Hale followed at a respectful distance. He knew the look on her face, the thinking look, the gathering threads look. She walked toward the side of the gatehouse. Her steps light. Here, eyes sharp. Her mind already moving ahead of everyone else. First, she studied the stone railing. Its surface held a faint sheen. She leaned closer, very close. A dark residue streaked along the edge, almost invisible in the dawn light, but not invisible to her. She touched it lightly with a gloved finger, rubbed it, smelled it. Oil. Thick. Mechanical. Out of place on an old stone rail. Someone gripped this, she murmured, but not Edmund. Hale moved beside her. What is it? Residue from a tool, she said softly. Not dirt, not dust, and certainly not something a historian's hands would leave. Hale's brow tightened. She continued walking. Not waiting for his reaction, she reached the ground below the balcony. There, she knelt slowly, examining the dirt, the gravel, the tiny impressions in the earth, 2 sets of footprints, one deep, one lighter, but the lighter ones stopped abruptly, mid-path, as if someone had been lifted, or carried, or dragged without leaving clear marks. She traced the shape with her fingers. The halt was unnatural. Clean, too clean for panic or accident. Hale crouched beside her. What do you make of it? She didn't answer. Not yet. Her eyes moved again, scanning, measuring, gathering more threads. Just beyond the prints, something small clung to a low bramble branch. Barely visible, barely anything. But Miss Marple saw it. She reached out gently, pinched it between her fingers, lifted it into the growing sunlight. A scrap of brown wool, torn, thin, caught on the thorns with purpose written all over it. Hale leaned close. That from Edmund's coat? Miss Marple shook her head. No. She turned the scrap, looked at the texture, the weave, the thread quality. It belonged to a heavier coat, a working coat, a coat meant for tasks, not lectures, not Edmund's coat at all. Hale frowned. Then whose is it? Miss Marple's eyes drifted slowly, toward the gathering of villagers. Her gaze passed over each coat, each color, each shoulder seam. And then she paused, just for a breath, just long enough for Hale to notice. She folded the scrap carefully, slipped it into her pocket. This, she said quietly, was no accident. Hale stared at her. You're certain? Miss Marple gave a small nod. Certain. Composed. Unshaken. She looked back at the prints, at the untouched dust on the stairs, at the oil on the railing, at the body placed neatly below. Someone arranged all of this, she whispered, and they made one mistake. Hale's voice dropped. What mistake? Miss Marple touched the pocket where the wool scrap rested. Her eyes sharpened, focused, unwavering. They left something behind. Because the wool scrap belonged to someone standing in the crowd, pretending to be innocent. Miss Marple returned to the lane slowly, her hands folded neatly, her expression thoughtful. The wool scrap in her pocket pressed lightly against her palm. A quiet reminder, a quiet warning. Inspector Hale followed her, close enough to listen, far enough to let her think. The villagers waited anxiously, eyes darting, breath uneven, fear woven through every whisper. Hale cleared his throat. Mrs. Linton, he said gently, you argued with Mr. Blythe yesterday. All eyes turned to her. Mrs. Elspeth Linton lifted her chin, tried to appear composed, failed instantly. Her voice shook. Yes, I did. Edmund wanted the corner of my field, claimed he needed it for research purposes. But that field belonged to my husband, and his father before him. She inhaled sharply. I told Edmund he would never take it. Miss Marple watched her carefully, her trembling hands, her reddened eyes, her anger still crackling beneath her grief. But anger alone did not make a murderer. Not in Miss Marple's experience. Hale nodded slowly. Did you see him last night? No, Mrs. Linton whispered. I wanted nothing to do with him. Her words rang with truth. But truth was not the same as innocence. Miss Marple shifted her gaze. Her eyes landed on Jonas Reed next, the handyman. Hands rough, eyes tired, jaw tight with something that wasn't shock, but something close to fear. Hale stepped toward him. Jonas, you have a set of keys to the gatehouse, don't you? Jonas swallowed. His throat bobbed hard. They're for repairs, he muttered. Only repairs. When was the last time you went inside? Hale asked. Jonas hesitated. Too long. Miss Marple observed every twitch, every breath, every nervous shift of his boots on the gravel. 2 weeks ago, Jonas finally said. Just checking the beams. They creak in winter. Miss Marple's voice entered softly. You didn't go inside last night? Jonas shook his head quickly. Far too quickly. No, ma'am. I was home. His eyes flickered. Once, sideways, toward the gatehouse, then away. A man hiding fear, or hiding something worse. Miss Marple did not press him. Not yet. Another figure hovered at the back of the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, coat too new, boots too clean for village mud. A stranger. One Miss Marple had not seen before. Hale noticed him too. You there, he called. What's your name? The man stiffened. Darren Pike, he replied, his voice low, measured, practiced. You're staying at the inn? Hale asked. Yes. When did you arrive? Last night. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. Convenient. Too convenient. Did you walk near the gatehouse? Hale pressed. The stranger hesitated, just for a breath. Then, I like early walks, he said. I passed by here after sunset. Miss Marple tilted her head. Did you hear the bell this morning? He swallowed. Yes. Did you see anyone? Hale asked. No. Another lie. Soft. Smooth. But a lie. Miss Marple felt it immediately. 3 suspects. 3 different fears. 3 different paths leading toward the bell. Mrs. Linton's anger. Jonas Reed's access. The stranger's timing. One of them knew more. Much more. Miss Marple looked from one face to another. Slowly. Calmly. Her eyes lingered on Jonas Reed. Then on the stranger. Then back on Jonas. Something in her expression changed. Sharpened. Focused. She whispered to Hale. One of them knows why the bell rang. One of them. And Miss Marple had just realized which one was lying. The villagers slowly dispersed into uneasy clusters. Fear thickened the chilly morning air. Whispers tangled. Suspicions grew louder. Inspector Hale questioned a few witnesses. Miss Marple watched quietly. Her eyes moved across every face. She waited for the one voice that would crack. It arrived unexpectedly. Young Toby Finch hovered near the gatehouse wall, hands tucked, inside his sleeves, shoes scuffing the gravel, trying to stay invisible. Miss Marple saw him. Children rarely hid from her, especially frightened ones. She approached gently. No pressure, no sternness, just warmth. Toby, she said softly, you've seen something, haven't you? His eyes widened, then dropped to the ground. He tried to speak, failed, swallowed hard. Inspector Hale stepped closer. Not too near, just enough to show he was listening. You're safe to talk, Hale said. No one here will harm you. Toby hesitated again, then breathed out slowly. 2 nights ago, his voice cracked. I was walking home from the mill path. Miss Marple nodded. Go on, dear. Toby looked toward the gatehouse, then back at them. I heard voices inside the gatehouse. Hale stiffened. That building was supposed to be locked. Toby nodded quickly. That's why I got scared. I hid behind the wall. Miss Marple listened carefully. Children remembered details adults overlooked. Their fear sharpened their senses. Toby continued. There were 2 men. One shouting, loud, angry. Miss Marple asked. And the other? Toby swallowed. He sounded scared, really scared. He kept saying, please, not yet, begging. Inspector Hale leaned in slightly. Could you hear words? Toby nodded. I only remember one clear thing. His voice dropped to a whisper. A man said, time's up. The phrase hit the air like a blow. Sharp, cold, final. Miss Marple blinked slowly. That phrase was not said in argument. It was said in certainty. A warning. A decision. Hale's jaw tightened. Are you sure those were the words? Toby nodded again. I'll never forget it. Miss Marple placed a comforting hand on the boy's arm. You've been very brave. He looked relieved, almost lighter. But fear still clung to him. When Toby walked back to his mother, Hale exhaled. 2 men. One threatening Edmund. 2 nights ago, Miss Marple added quietly. And one of those men knew something was coming. Something inevitable. Hale turned to her. We need to identify the second man. Miss Marple looked toward the villagers again. At Mrs. Linton. At Jonas. At the stranger at the inn. Her eyes stopped on Jonas Reed for a fraction of a second. Then shifted to the stranger. Then back again. Too many lies. Too many missing pieces. But the phrase lingered in her mind. Time's up. Spoken by someone who believed it. Someone who felt cornered. Someone who had reason to make sure Edmund never spoke again. Miss Marple whispered. Someone warned Edmund. Before killing him. And now she knew the argument in the gatehouse was the beginning of everything. Inspector Hale and Miss Marple walked toward Edmund Blythe's cottage. The villagers kept their distance. Fear followed them like a quiet shadow. The front door creaked open. Cold air settled inside the dim hallway. Dust lingered in corners. Books stacked everywhere. A scholar's life. A solitary one. Miss Marple stepped in first. Her eyes traced every surface, every shelf, every object moved or not moved. Edmund's study sat at the end of the hall. The door stood half open. A weak draught fluttered a paper on the floor. Hale pushed the door fully. The room felt frozen, untouched, but not untouched enough. On the desk lay a ledger, large, heavy, worn at the edges. Miss Marple approached it carefully. She flipped the cover. Her brows immediately tightened. Several pages were missing, cleanly torn, neatly removed, as if taken with purpose. Hale leaned closer. What was he hiding? Miss Marple turned another page. More damage, more missing entries, but not random. Whoever tore the pages knew exactly which ones mattered. She scanned the remaining entries. Line written in Edmund's precise hand. Dates, amounts, locations. Then she paused. 3 repeated phrases caught her eye. Restoration fees, gate repairs, structural assessment. Hale frowned. He spent village funds? Miss Marple nodded gently. It appears so. But look closely, Inspector. She pointed to the figures. Large withdrawals, hundreds of pounds, across months. Hale's jaw tightened. And yet the gatehouse is falling apart. Exactly, Miss Marple whispered. No repairs were ever done. The silence thickened, more suspicious than any noise. Hale stepped back, ran a hand through his hair. So the money vanished, Miss Marple nodded. And Edmund didn't report it stolen, nor did he attempt repairs later. Which means he kept the money, Hale finished. Or tried to. Miss Marple turned another page. The handwriting grew shakier nearer the end. Lines rushed, numbers inconsistent. A man under pressure, a man losing control. One final entry froze. Her hand. A withdrawal marked with one word. Urgent, Miss Marple whispered. He was paying someone. Hale stiffened. A blackmailer? Possibly. Or a partner turning against him. Also possible. Miss Marple moved to Edmund's writing cabinet. She opened drawers slowly. One held maps. One held research notes. One held nothing but dust. The bottom drawer creaked. A single folder lay inside. Empty. But its label remained. Gatehouse Restoration Accounts. Hale clenched his jaw. Gone, Miss Marple nodded. And intentionally. Someone had removed every document tied to the missing money. Someone knew Edmund's weakest point, and someone feared those records. Hale closed the drawer. We're dealing with someone protecting themselves. Someone who needed those pages gone. Miss Marple looked back at the desk. The torn edges. The missing entries. The desperate final line. She whispered, where did the money disappear, and why? She turned toward the door. Her expression sharpened. Because whoever took it had a reason far deeper than greed. And Miss Marple now suspected the missing money was the true beginning of Edmund's death. They returned to the gatehouse path, quietly. Inspector Hale carried the ledger. Miss Marple carried her thoughts, both heavy in their own way. Edmund's body had been moved to a sheltered corner, covered more respectfully now, but his coat still lay nearby, folded, dusty, waiting. Miss Marple approached it slowly, her step soft, her focus sharp. Something felt unfinished, unsaid, hidden. She knelt beside the coat, ran her hand gently along the pockets. Light, careful, deliberate. One pocket sagged oddly, weighted, unusual. Inspector Hale stepped closer. Something inside? Miss Marple didn't speak. Not yet. She slid her fingers inside the pocket. Touched paper. Cold. Firm. Folded tightly. She pulled it out. A sealed envelope. Old. Crumpled at the edges, but sealed with purpose, hidden with intention. Hale leaned in. No address? No. No seal? No. Miss Marple turned the envelope over. Twice. 3 times. The paper felt thick, expensive, not village stationery, not Edmund's own supply. She opened it carefully, her fingers steady, her breath calm. Inside lay one sheet, folded once, no signature, no date, just one sharp, chilling line. Pay tomorrow, or I tell them everything. Hale exhaled sharply. A blackmail threat. Miss Marple nodded. Yes. And someone expected payment today. Yes. She held the letter at arm's length, studied the handwriting, slow curves, tight strokes, a particular pressure on every downward line. She blinked once, slowly, her mind turning a page she had turned before. Hale saw her expression shift. You recognize it? Miss Marple did not answer directly. Instead, she stepped into better light, tilted the letter, watched how the ink caught the dawn. I have seen this hand, she said quietly. Recently. Hale tensed. Whose? She didn't reply. Not yet. Her certainty was forming slowly, piece by piece. A familiar curve, a familiar tilt, a familiar caution in each letter. Someone tried to disguise the handwriting. But not enough. Not for her eyes. Miss Marple held the letter close again. She traced the word, tomorrow, the way the final W dipped slightly. Yes, she knew that dip, that hesitation. That exact hesitation belonged to someone who always wrote in fear of being corrected or caught. Hale spoke again. Miss Marple, if you know something. She raised a hand gently. Not yet, Inspector. The truth must be placed in the right order, or it becomes the wrong truth. He sighed, frustrated but respectful. He had learned not to rush her. Miss Marple folded the letter, placed it inside her handbag, kept her expression calm, but her eyes had sharpened. This letter wasn't a threat. It was a deadline. Hale paced once. Someone blackmailed Edmund. Someone he knew. Someone with access to his study. Miss Marple nodded. And someone who feared what he discovered. Her gaze drifted toward the village again. Toward the inn. Toward Mrs. Linton's cottage. Toward Jonas Reed. She had seen this handwriting. Yes, she was certain. One villager wrote like this. Only one. And Miss Marple now knew the letter's writer was standing among them, pretending to grieve. Inspector Hale and Miss Marple walked toward the village inn, the lantern and lark, warm light in the windows, but tension behind the door. The innkeeper, Mr. Bramble, met them at once, his face pale, his apron twisted between nervous fingers. You've come about the guest, he whispered, not asked, not wondered, knew. Miss Marple nodded gently. Tell us everything, Mr. Bramble. He swallowed hard. He arrived 3 nights ago. Tall man, broad shoulders, walked with a limp. Inspector Hale's eyes sharpened. A limp? Yes, sir. Dragged his left foot a little. Said it was an old injury. Miss Marple listened closely. People lied about names, about money, about purpose. But injuries? They rarely lied about those. Mr. Bramble continued. He signed the register as Peter Glenn, but that wasn't his name. Hale raised a brow. You're certain? The innkeeper nodded quickly. He hesitated before writing, as if choosing a name, and he paid in cash. Miss Marple exchanged a glance with Hale. Cash spoke loudly. False name spoke louder. What did he want in Brambleford Hollow? Hale asked. Mr. Bramble wet his lips. He asked for Edmund Blythe, by name, said he wanted to discuss old property matters. Miss Marple's breath slowed. Property, land, gatehouse. It threaded together too neatly. He questioned me, Mr. Bramble continued, about the old gatehouse. Who held the keys? How the bell worked? Inspector Hale stiffened. How did you respond? I told him Jonas Reed keeps the keys for repairs, the innkeeper whispered, and that the bell mechanism hasn't been touched in decades. Miss Marple tilted her head. And how did he react to that? Mr. Bramble shivered. He smiled, a cold smile, as if he already knew. Hale stepped closer. What did he do next? He went to see Edmund, the innkeeper said. I watched from the porch. They spoke outside. Edmund looked affrighted. Miss Marple did not miss that detail. Fear changes posture. Fear changes voices. Fear leaves traces. The innkeeper nodded rapidly. And that man kept watching the gatehouse, every evening, studying it, studying the bell rope, studying the door. Inspector Hale asked, Did anyone see him leave? Mr. Bramble shook his head. No. His room was empty by dawn. Bed, untouched. Key left on the table. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. In other words, he left before the bell rang. The innkeeper stepped back. Exactly when it rang, ma'am. The moment it sounded, he vanished. A chill swept through the room. Truth always dropped the temperature. Inspector Hale muttered. He didn't run from Edmund. He ran from what he started. Miss Marple folded her hands, her voice quiet, measured. He knew the bell was coming. He knew the discovery was coming. And he left to avoid being seen. Mr. Bramble whispered, So, he killed Edmund? Miss Marple shook her head slowly. No, not yet. We don't know that. But her eyes told Hale something else. She doubted the stranger was the killer. He was something more dangerous. A catalyst. She looked toward the door, toward the road leading away from the inn, toward the path a limping man had taken. Because Miss Marple now knew the stranger hadn't fled the crime, he had fled someone else involved in it. By afternoon, the village had grown tense. Windows shut, curtains lowered. Whispers moved faster than footsteps. Inspector Hale and Miss Marple returned to Edmund's study for a final, careful search. Not for papers, not for clues left in panic, but for truths left in habit. Miss Marple opened Edmund's cabinet again. Top drawer, map drawer, correspondence drawer. And there it was, a thin folder wedged sideways, almost hidden, almost forgotten, but not forgotten by her. She slid it out, opened it. Her eyes sharpened immediately. Deeds, maps, property records, all relating to old parcels of land in Brambleford Hollow. Inspector Hale leaned beside her. Buying property? Edmund? For what? Miss Marple tapped a document lightly. Look here, Inspector. The signatures. He examined them, slowly, then frowned. They're odd. Yes, Miss Marple said softly. The curves are wrong. The pressure, inconsistent. They are not genuine signatures. Hale straightened. Forged? Certainly forged, she replied. She flipped another document. Another mismatched signature. Another forged transfer. Edmund was acquiring land quietly, she murmured. One piece at a time, and someone noticed. Inspector Hale crossed his arms. He was risking a lot. Why buy so secretly? Miss Marple pointed to a different section of the file. Debt. Heavy debt. Hale read the notes. Interest deadlines. Loan demands. Edmund's name repeated beside mounting figures. Miss Marple continued gently. He needed the land. He planned to sell it to pay off what he owed, but he forged signatures rather than negotiate fairly. Hale shook his head. So someone discovered the truth. Yes, and someone confronted him, likely more than once. She lifted another paper. A list of land titles, one name circled in red ink several times. Mrs. Elspeth Linton's late husband. Hale's expression tightened. That field she refused to sell. Edmund tried to forge his signature, Miss Marple said softly. When she compared documents, she must have realized. Then she confronted him. Hale muttered. The argument yesterday. Indeed. Miss Marple sifted the papers again. One note stood out, written hastily, nearly illegible. Threat received. Can't delay much longer. Hale exhaled sharply. So Edmund was under pressure from someone else too. Yes, she nodded. 2 threats. One financial, one personal, both closing in. She folded the note carefully, placed it beside the forged deeds. Someone, she said slowly, was about to lose everything if Edmund spoke. Hale looked out the window, toward the cottages, toward the villagers carrying secrets in their pockets. Who? He asked softly. Miss Marple turned, her expression still calm, but her eyes carried certainty. A person whose land was signed away in those papers. A person desperate enough to confront Edmund 2 nights ago. Desperate enough to say, "Time's up." Hale's breath caught. Jonas Reed, or the stranger, Miss Marple whispered, or someone who had more to lose than either. Her gaze drifted toward the gatehouse, toward the crowd beyond, toward one villager who had avoided her eyes all morning, because someone in Brambleford Hollow stood on the edge of ruin, and murder was their only escape. The gatehouse felt colder in the late morning light, too quiet, too still, as if the stone itself held its breath. Miss Marple stepped inside with Inspector Hale behind her. Her eyes swept the walls, the beams, the dust. Every detail mattered now. Every silence, too. The bell ropes hung from the ceiling, thick, weathered, covered in decades of untouched dust. Miss Marple moved closer. She did not touch them. She didn't need to. The truth lay on the surface. Not a single mark, she murmured. No pull, no disturbance, no attempt to use them. Hale looked up at the ropes. They're the only way to ring the bell. Miss Marple shook her head gently. No, Inspector. There is another way. She stepped past the ropes, toward the old gear housing at the back wall. Iron, heavy, cold. Hale followed. Those gears haven't moved in 40 years. Miss Marple crouched, studied the metal closely. Her eyes focused on a single smear, dark, greasy, unmistakable. Someone turned the mechanism manually, she said softly. A strong someone. Hale stiffened. That would take real force. Or desperation, Miss Marple added. She stood slowly, her hands folded neatly. Her gaze drifted to the floor. The faint trail of footprints she'd noticed earlier now seemed even clearer. Deep prints near the gears, lighter ones leading away, and the strange abrupt stop, where the soil shifted unnaturally. Hale followed her eyes. He carried Edmund, he whispered. Miss Marple nodded, lifted him, positioned him, then rang the bell to summon the village. Hale exhaled. Someone wanted everyone to find the body at once. Yes, she said, to create a fixed time of death, a fixed narrative. She stepped outside again, into the cold light. Her gaze moved to the wool scrap still tucked in her pocket. I found this earlier, she said, holding it out. Hale examined it. Brown wool, rough, heavy weave. A working coat, she said. Not Edmund's. Hale looked up. Jonas Reed wears a coat like this. Miss Marple didn't speak. Not immediately. She watched the villagers gathering again at the lane. She looked at their coats, their shoulders, their stitching. One coat, one very specific coat, had a tear missing exactly this scrap. Hale caught her glance. Miss Marple, you've matched it. But she shook her head gently. No, Inspector, I've confirmed it. Matching is one thing, placing is another. She walked toward the entrance slowly, thoughtfully, her mind stitching clues together with seamless precision. Strong enough to turn the gears, she murmured. Desperate enough to stage a fall, and wearing a coat torn on a bramble outside the gatehouse. Hale closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with clarity. There's only one person who fits all 3. Miss Marple nodded once, softly, calmly. But before we accuse him, she said, we must gather everyone. The truth must be unveiled together. Hale looked toward the cottages, toward the villagers beginning to drift back toward the gatehouse. "Are you ready?" he asked. Miss Marple didn't answer. She simply looked at the coat with the missing scrap, because the coat belonged to someone now walking toward them completely unaware they were about to be named. The gatehouse hall filled slowly, uneasy. Feet, uneasy breaths. Shadows from the tall windows stretched across the floor like silent spectators. Miss Marple stood near the center, calm, steady, her hands folded gently. Inspector Hale beside her, notebook shut, eyes alert. The villagers murmured nervously. Mrs. Linton clutched her shawl. Jonas Reed lingered near the back wall. The tall stranger stood stiffly near the door, faces pale, hearts unsettled. Miss Marple waited until the room quieted. Then she spoke. Soft, clear, precise. "Thank you for gathering. We must now set the truth in order." A ripple passed through the room. Hale watched her closely. The villagers leaned in. Miss Marple began with the bell. That bell did not ring by accident. The ropes were untouched, the dust beside them undisturbed. It was rung manually, by someone strong enough to force the old mechanism. She let the words settle. Eyes widened, breaths sharpened. The purpose, she continued, was not to warn, but to summon, to fix the time of death, to ensure the body was found immediately. Gasps. A few steps backward. The stranger shifted uncomfortably. Miss Marple moved to the next thread. Second, Edmund Blythe did not fall. His body was placed. Neatly, carefully, without any signs of struggle. Mrs. Linton began to cry softly. Constable Hart lowered his head. Miss Marple pressed on. Third, the missing ledger pages, withdrawals labeled restoration and gate repairs. But no repairs were ever made. Money vanished. A murmur rose again. Hale lifted a hand to steady the crowd. "Those missing funds," Miss Marple said, "match a pattern of blackmail, a man under pressure, a man running out of time." She opened her handbag, removed the folded threat letter, held it up for all to see. "This," she continued, "was found in Edmund's coat, unsigned. But the handwriting—" She paused. Her eyes moved across the villagers. Slowly, very slowly. "It belongs to someone here." The room tensed. Someone swallowed hard. Someone shifted their weight. Miss Marple slipped the letter back into her bag, then reached into her pocket. She lifted the small torn scrap of brown wool. "And this," she said softly, "was caught on a bramble beneath the gatehouse, torn from a coat worn last night. A coat belonging to someone strong enough to turn the bell gears, strong enough to lift a body, and desperate enough to stage a fall." Her eyes moved once more across the room, a sweeping glance, but stopping only for a heartbeat on one face. "One person," she said gently, "meets every condition. One person was near the gatehouse. One person had the keys. One person feared Edmund's discovery. One person wrote the letter." Silence cracked the room. Breathing froze. Miss Marple took one step forward, her voice soft, final. "And that person is—" Every head turned, every face shifted, every eye locked onto a single trembling figure near the back, because Jonas Reed suddenly staggered backward, his face drained, as Miss Marple prepared to speak his name. The room held its breath. No one moved. No one blinked. Even the old gatehouse beams seemed to listen. Miss Marple stepped forward gently, her voice soft, measured, unshaken. Only one person needed the village awake, the moment Edmund Blythe was found. Every gaze swung toward Jonas Reed. His hands tightened, his breath hitched, his boots scraped across the stone floor. Miss Marple continued, "Only one person had the keys. Only one knew the bell ropes wouldn't work. Only one was strong enough to turn the old mechanism. Only one tore a piece of brown wool on the brambles." Jonas's shoulders collapsed inward, his eyes filled, his face drained. Miss Marple's voice lowered. "Jonas Reed." A gasp rippled through the hall. Mrs. Linton covered her mouth. Constable Hart stumbled back. The stranger straightened sharply. Jonas didn't try to run. He didn't shout. He didn't deny anything. He simply broke. right there in front of them all. His voice cracked. I didn't mean to kill him. I swear it. I swear. Inspector Hale stepped closer. Tell us. Jonas wiped his face with the back of his hand, shaking, barely able to stand. Edmund, he was blackmailing me. His voice shook with every word. He found my mother's old land documents, said there was an error, said he could fix it, for a price. He stopped to breathe, hard, painfully. I didn't have the money. I told him that. But he said if I didn't pay, he'd prove the land wasn't ours. He'd take the cottage. Our home. Mrs. Hemsley gasped. Mrs. Linton whispered he wouldn't. But Miss Marple's quiet nod told them he would. Edmund Blythe was desperate, and desperation changes men. Jonas continued, voice breaking. I met him at the gatehouse last night. I begged him to stop. He said time's up, said he'd go to the council in the morning. His hands trembled violently. I grabbed his arm. He pulled away. Lost his footing. He fell against the rail. I swear it was an accident. Inspector Hale asked softly, And the bell? Jonas swallowed. I panicked. I thought no one would believe me, so I carried him down, placed him on the gravel, then forced the old gears to ring the bell. Miss Marple lowered her eyes. It was a terrible choice, made from fear. Jonas nodded miserably. I thought if everyone came running at once, they'd think he slipped in the night. An accident. No questions. Hale sighed heavily. Jonas Reed, you will come with me. Jonas didn't resist. He only whispered, I never wanted this. The villagers watched in stunned silence, some pitying him, some horrified, some unsure. But Miss Marple watched differently. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not unkindly but thoughtfully. Jonas was telling the truth, but not the whole truth. Not yet. She stepped closer, her voice quiet, gentle. Jonas, there is still something you haven't told us. Jonas's head jerked up. Fear flashed, raw, immediate. Because Jonas Reed wasn't hiding how Edmund died, he was hiding who else was involved. Inspector Hale stepped closer to Jonas. Not threatening, not harsh, just steady, firm enough to hold the truth in place. Jonas, he said quietly, you're holding something back. Tell us all of it. Jonas wiped his face again. His breath hitched. His hands shook. He looked at Miss Marple as if her calm alone allowed him to speak. It wasn't just the blackmail, he whispered. It was the land papers. A ripple moved through the crowd. Mrs. Linton gasped. Mr. Darlow muttered something under his breath. Jonas continued. Edmund forged them. All of them. Every deed. Every transfer. He made it look like Mama's cottage land wasn't ours. Inspector Hale's jaw tightened. Why? Jonas swallowed hard. He needed property. He needed collateral. He needed something to sell fast. He was deep in debt, deeper than anyone knew. Miss Marple nodded softly. Debt motivates desperate hands. Jonas nodded miserably. Yes, and Edmund used that desperation on me. He leaned against the wall, exhausted. I begged him not to take our cottage. Mama's sick. It's all we have. He didn't care. The villagers shifted. Shock, anger, sadness, all mixing like storm clouds. Jonas's voice broke again. He summoned me to the gatehouse 2 nights ago, told me I had until dawn today to pay. Time's up, he said. Inspector Hale exchanged a glance with Miss Marple. Toby's story. Confirmed. Jonas continued. I panicked. I grabbed his arm. I only wanted to stop him. He pulled away. He covered his face. I swear. He slipped, lost his balance, hit the rail, fell hard. Miss Marple stepped closer, her voice gentle. And after he fell? Jonas's answer was barely a whisper. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I sat there, with him, until I realized no one would believe me. Inspector Hale nodded slowly, because the papers were missing. Jonas looked up, eyes red. Because I tore out the pages before coming here. I burned them. The room gasped. Miss Marple didn't flinch. She had expected as much. Jonas continued. I carried Edmund down, placed him on the gravel, made it look like he fell earlier. Then I turned the old gears and rang the bell. Inspector Hale breathed out slowly. You wanted witnesses. You wanted timing. You wanted confusion. Jonas nodded helplessly. Anything to make it look like an accident. Silence swept the hall. A deep, heavy silence. Not approval, not forgiveness, but understanding, however. Bitter. Inspector Hale placed a hand on Jonas's arm. Jonas Reed, you will come with me now. Jonas didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't look back. He only whispered, I never meant for any of it to happen. As Hale led him away, the villagers finally exhaled. Slow, uneven, shaken. But Miss Marple stood still, listening, thinking. The bell tower loomed above them, silent again. Yet its echo lingered in the cold air. She looked up at it quietly, her eyes narrowing, because the bell's echo held one last unanswered question, one Miss Marple wasn't done with yet. Thank you, dear listeners, for sharing this quiet moment with us tonight. Fear, truth, and the choices we make in their shadow, they shape even the smallest village lanes. Tell me which clue caught your ear tonight, and where are you listening from? Your thoughts always warm this space. Tomorrow we open a new door, a missing candle, and a locked attic waiting in the boards-in. Dark. Until then, rest well, stay close, and remember, tomorrow, another kettle will boil.